All right, everybody, here we go. We are, we are working on the beginning of project number one. This is your apartment project. This project is due on the 10th of next month. So that's October 10th. As you can tell, I've got AutoCAD started, and we're going to start a brand new drawing using the template that we've created in a previous lesson. So all I need to do at this point, you can see I got my Windows Explorer window up. For those of you who don't know how to do this, those of you coming from a Mac side, if you don't have that little yellow folder down at the bottom of your desktop that's labeled File Explorer, if you hold down, and I'm assuming you're doing this either in a boot camp installation or in a Parallels installation. As a reminder, I'm running this on Parallels. Hold down the Command key on your keyboard and then push E, and you'll get your, this is the Finder window, essentially. And I'm going to open my Documents folder. This is where I've saved everything. And I'm going to do a little bit of organization here. I'm going to create a new folder. CVAD. Instead of CVAD blocks, I'm going to rename this. I'm going to call this blocks. Just simplify that a little bit. But I'm going to stick this folder inside the CVAD folder. There we go. Open up CVAD. There's blocks. I'm going to pull a few things out of the blocks folder. I'm going to pull my template, my title block, and the image that I used in my title block. I'm going to pull this out. So I'm going to hold the Control key down on my keyboard and hit the X button, which is the cut. It's a Windows standard shortcut, Control X. Go back to my CVAD folder, and I'm going to paste. I'm going to move them right here. Right? Okay, so I'm going to create a new file, and I'm going to use my template as my starting point. So, and you can tell the difference between a template and a regular AutoCAD file. This is a regular AutoCAD file. It has the blue and yellow icon on it, and it says DWG file here under file types. Alternate, we have the red icon for an AutoCAD template, and it says AutoCAD template over here. Now, perhaps your screen looks like this. You can still see it says DWG file or AutoCAD template. You can see it's got the A there for the AutoCAD template, and it has the blue and yellow icon there for a DWG file. If this is what your file looks like, or if this is what your window looks like, where you're not seeing any of that, you might just have to play around a little with the settings to see what's going on. So I click down here at the bottom. That way I can see, here are my file types. Here's some information, some dates about them. So to start a new file from my existing template, I've got AutoCAD already started. I've got my Windows Explorer window open, and I'm just going to double click. I selected my my template and I highlighted it. I've been clicking on it once, but I'm going to double click this file, and it will create a brand new drawing using all the properties of that file as its starting point. And once it's done loading everything, there we go. You can see up here at the top it says drawing number 1 or drawing 1. Now, some of you might be looking at, no, Facebook, go away. Some of you may be looking at differing installations on how this is run. Like I said, I'm running this in Parallels, and in Parallels you can see how I've got this herky-jerky mouse motion going on. It's not very smooth. That's because I'm taxing my hardware. I'm running Parallels, which is running Windows itself as a Macintosh program. And so Windows cannot use all of the hardware for my computer. Some of that hardware has to be reserved to keep the Mac OS up and running. You can see it's still trying to load some information. Now I want to turn a couple of settings on that are down here at the bottom. So if I go to the far bottom right hand corner, excuse me, I'm going to click on customization. This is a regular left click, and as soon as other things are done loading, this menu option will show up. Come on. There we go. I want to turn on line weight. You can see now I've got the ability to display my line weights or turn them on and off very quickly. I don't have to enter a command prompt to do that. So I actually want to show my line weights. I want to turn those on. I'm going to come up here and I'm going to select a specific layer that I posted to Blackboard. Scroll down. I want existing column grids. I want that to be my current layer, and I'm going to create a rectangle. And I'm going to start my rectangle at 0, 0. According to the handout, I need this rectangle to be a certain size. And if you look at the dimensions that are shown on your handout for the first floor plan of your apartment unit, it shows exactly the offsets that I need to create here. So what I need is I need my first distance, my x distance, to be 44'3". Now I don't have to specify inches. AutoCAD automatically understands that I'm using inches if I leave the feet mark out of it. I'll type a comma. That moves me to the next field, and now it's 18'6", and push return. So now I'm going to zoom extents, and I can either double click on my scroll wheel, or I type Z, return, E, return, and that will zoom all the way out. Now one of the things that I have left to do is I need to establish what scale I'm going to print this drawing at. And that's what this guy down here is all about. If I click on this item, then I'm presented with an enormous list of scales to choose from. I want to select 1/4 inch equals a foot. And it doesn't look like anything's changed yet. I actually have to type one thing to make this change visible. I'll type RE at the command prompt and press return. That stands for regen or regenerate. You can see those line types a little bit better now. I'm going to zoom out. Okay. I am going to explode this item. It's a command we haven't looked at before. Its icon is up here at the top, right there for explode. Breaks a compound object into its component objects. Well, because remember the difference between a polyline and a regular line, a polyline is sort of a built-in grouping. I want to break this group up. So I can click on this icon, or its shortcut is X for explode. And I'm going to select my line, or select my polyline rather, and push return. That's all I have to do. Now each one of those is a separate object. It's exactly what I wanted it to do. I'm going to use my offset tool, and I need to offset 5 feet. I'll offset this right-hand line 5 feet further to the right. I'm done with this offset. I need to do more offsets, but it's going to be a different distance. So I'll push return. I'm going to close out of this offset command, push return again, start offset again. I want to offset 4 feet. Now I want to offset all the outermost lines to the outside. So this line that I just created goes 4 feet out. The top line goes up. The left line goes to the left. The bottom line goes down. So we should have something that looks like this right now. So I'm done with my offset. I'll push return. Now there's a couple of different ways I can do this next bit. I can use the extend command if I wanted to, and I can click on that line because this is the object that I want to extend towards. Push return, and now click on the item that I want to extend. I could extend these lines up. My mouse is extra sensitive right now. It's hard for me to lock on. There we go. Now I can use my extend command that way, or I can use my fillet command with a radius of 0. And then I can work my way around. And you can see I've got this weird If you've ever taken a box and you've torn the corners out of a box, it's kind of what this looks like. Okay, now those lines that we just created, that are those outermost lines, I'm going to erase them. There we go. Okay, so I've created the column grid that I need for my apartment project. I'm going to change my current layer. I'm going to move this up to a wall. Dash E is my existing wall. Oops, hate it when that happens. Here it is right there, a wall E. Now I'm going to draw a rectangle, REC at the command prompt, or I can come up here and I can use that icon if I wanted to. But I'm just typing into the rectangle just because that's where my fingers go. I'm going to draw a rectangle from this intersection down and across to this intersection. There we go. Just a couple of left clicks. You don't always have to use hard coordinates, and you don't always have to use vector tracking and object tracking and things like that. Sometimes you can just click on objects, on items, and use those as their snap points. So now I need to create the thickness of my wall, so I'm going to offset again. So this time I'm going to offset 4 inches, and I'm going to offset that rectangle we just drew 4 inches to the inside and 4 inches to the outside. Okay, press return because I'm done. And I'm going to zoom in a little so I can see what I'm doing. I'm going to select my middle rectangle and I'm going to erase him. Okay. I now want to explode these 2 pink rectangles. So I'm going to highlight both of my objects, type X at the command prompt, push return. That's it. You're going to look down here, it says explode 2 items found. So now they're all made out of individual parts. All right. Now, again, more than one way to skin a cat on how to get this next step done. I'm going to use one method on the top, and I'm going to use a different method on the bottom, but we're going to do the exact same thing in 2 different ways. So I'm going to start with my stretch command. Now remember, a stretch command only works with a crossing window, and it only modifies the vertices of the object that are inside that crossing window, or the endpoints of an object. So I'm going to left click, drag my mouse across to the left and down. Now I want to select the top edge of the outer rectangle, but not the top edge of the inner rectangle. If I cross the grid lines, that's fine. But you notice I'm not crossing those endpoints of the grid lines. I hope that makes sense. So I'll left click again. Now I do not want to modify this top line. So I'm going to hold my shift key down and I'm going to click on that line, and that will remove that line from the command that I'm about to begin. Okay, done with that. Done selecting my object, so I'll press return. Now my base point at this point, I don't care where I click as long as there's nice open space to the north of me, as it were. So I'm going to just left click out here in space. I'm going to move my mouse up so that I'm on that vertical guide, and I'm going to type in 24. You could also type in 2 feet. It's the same thing. Push return. Okay. So I can use the same trick for the bottom, but then we'll have to add another 8 inches to it. So if I stretch and come from the bottom up across to get the top edge of the inside rectangle, but not the top edge of the outside. So I'll left click and hold my shift key down and select that inside line. I can still do this. I'm done selecting my objects. I can click somewhere out in outer space. Now I know that I moved the last lines up 24 inches. And the wall thickness is 8 inches. So 24 plus 8 is 32. So I'm going to type 32. The reason that I type 32 is I want these endpoints up here to be parallel to one another. I'm going to zoom back out. Now there's another way to do this exact same thing. If I don't have any command run right now, so I'll click on that object, click on the outside left hand line of the wall, and I'm going to click on the grip, drag my mouse down, and I can just type 24. So that brought the endpoint of this vertical line 24 inches below the location where it previously was. So now what I'm going to do that's a little different is I'm going to there's no command that's active. I'm going to select that inside line for the vertical wall. I'm going to hold my mouse over this endpoint. And then I'm going to move my mouse down in the menu that shows up and says lengthen. So I click on that. Now it doesn't matter what the X value is for my line. It keeps the angle of the line identical, so I can actually click on that endpoint of the adjacent line, and you can see the value immediately above still says 2'8". So if I left click right now, then those lines are in alignment. So I'm going to use my pan tool, and I'm going to do the same thing. Well, I'm going to do something a little different on this side. I'm going to do it a few more times. I'm going to highlight this line, move it down, or no, not move it down, I'm sorry. No command active, left click to select my line. I'm going to select my input, my endpoint. I'm going to modify the grip, drag my mouse down, type 24, push return. So that's not actually the move command. I'm modifying the line using the grips. So now I highlight the inside line, hover my mouse over, and don't left click until I have my mouse over lengthen, and then move my mouse to this endpoint. Left click. Okay. So I'm going to do the same thing, or I should say I'm going to do something similar to these horizontal lines. Hold my mouse, lengthen, just move out until I intersect with this outermost line here. I need to back up on this one because I did it differently, and I want to show you. So I selected my line, and instead of hovering to get this menu and then selecting an object here or selecting an item in the menu, I'm just going to left click right on that grip, and that's actually going to start my stretch command. And what I can do now is if I hover over this endpoint, I can get my object tracking up so that my object tracking is lining up vertically, and my modify tracking is aligned horizontally, so I have an implied intersection here. If I left click now, then it's all closed up. I'll click escape to unhighlight this. I'm going to use my line tool, and I'm going to close that off. Push return. It wasn't quite as closed as I would like. Because I'm running in a virtual environment, and also because I'm running the 64-bit version of Windows, I did not experience this problem this badly on the 32-bit version of Windows. 64-bit version is more resource intensive, but you'll notice how jerky my screen and my movements are sometimes. That's what running in a virtual environment can get you if you're really pushing the system, and I'm just starting to push the system. So I'm going to select my object, hold my mouse over it a second, click lengthen, come down. Now you notice as my mouse moves over this vertical line, it says endpoint. I have that square that shows up there. In order to select the endpoint, I do not need to move my mouse where that green square is. As long as the green square is showing up, when I left click, AutoCAD will accept the endpoint as the actual coordinate that I want. So left click, highlight this other wall, hover over the grip, come down to lengthen, move my mouse over until endpoint shows up, left click, okay, come back up, hit line. I could have done this at the command prompt just as easily. Select that endpoint and select that endpoint, and I'm done. So here we go. Double click on my scroll wheel, zoom extents. There we go. Now I'm going to do something a little different. This menu item right up here, if I click this icon, anything that I select, it will turn that layer off, just like in Illustrator or Photoshop. So if I select my grid lines here and I click on my grid line after selecting this icon right here, come over here and select my grid line, if it will let me, come on. There we go, left click. It's turned all my grids off. It hasn't erased anything, it's just not displaying them. So I'm done turning items off, I'm done with the command, I'll push return. Now remember when we discussed the trim command, and there's a way to use the trim command so that all objects will cut all other objects? That's what we're going to do. I'm going to zoom in, TR at the command prompt, select objects, or select all. I want every object to cut every other object, so I push return. And then I want to clean up all these intersections. Excuse me. Zoom back out. So I want to do this to all 4 intersections. Stop. And see, that's how bad the running in a virtualized environment when you're really taxing the underlying hardware. That's how bad things can be. You can see I'm going to have to make a few system changes here just to make things work the way that I want them to. So click there, click there. All right, there we go. Zoom extents. Okay, now how do I turn that layer back on for my grid lines? I can either come up here to my master list of layers and I can scroll down until I can see, here's S column grids E. You can see that little light bulb icon is blue. That means the light is off. So I could click on this and I can turn everything on. Or, so I'm going to turn this back off just to show you another tool to use. So my layer is off. If this icon turns the layer off, this icon turns every layer on. Just another way of accomplishing the same thing. Okay, so that's the basics of putting together your column grids and putting together your walls. Okay, we're going to save this file real quick, so you can either come up to the top of the window and click on the save icon, or go down to the AutoCAD menu and click on save, or right in the middle of the AutoCAD screen, hold down the control key on your keyboard and S. It's Windows standard. Every Windows application does control S is save. I'm going to put this in my project folder. I'm going to name this file A101. This comes in important. Please name it A101. You'll see why when we get to the next step. Click on save. Now up here at the top of my AutoCAD window it says A101 and it's even telling me where this document is saved. Excuse me. Alright, so there we go. So there's grid lines and walls to begin constructing the existing conditions for your apartment project. We'll see you on the next video.